Hey everybody, and welcome to the Deep Dive. We're going to be diving into a topic today that I think is going to hit pretty close to home for a lot of you out there. We're going to be talking about how to avoid financial exploitation, and we've got a very interesting source that we're going to be unpacking. It's a Reddit thread titled Men Only. What precautions have you taken to avoid being financially exploited by women? This is from the AskMenAdvice subreddit, and I think it's a really fascinating glimpse into the minds of men who are navigating this tricky terrain, especially after they've come into some serious money. So are you ready to explore this with me?
Absolutely. It's a topic that sparks so much conversation and debate, and there are some really interesting points made in the thread.
For sure. You know, what's so interesting to me is the original poster, we'll call him OP, he sold his business for a seven-figure sum, and he's been single for a while. He hasn't even gone on any crazy spending sprees or anything,
Hmm.
yet he's already thinking about how to protect himself.
It really does speak to a sense of awareness and foresight that I think a lot of people in that situation might not necessarily have. It's almost like he's anticipating potential pitfalls before they even arise.
Exactly. And the responses that he got were all over the map.
Yeah.
So let's start with maybe like the legal side of things.
Mm.
A lot of people jump straight to prenuptial agreements, and, it seems like the go-to protection for a lot of people, especially if marriage is on the horizon.
Yeah. Prenuptial agreements definitely a common tool, but I think it's important to remember that they're not foolproof. They are designed to spell out the financial responsibilities in case of a divorce, but their effectiveness can really vary depending on state laws and, the specific circumstances of the relationship. Sometimes they can even be challenged in court.
Yeah, that's a great point. So it's not just about having the prenup, it's about making sure that it's rock solid and covers all the bases, right?
Exactly. You really need to consult with an experienced attorney who specializes in prenuptial agreements and who understands the intricacies of the law in your specific jurisdiction.
Okay, so prenuptial agreements, check. Now, building on that legal theme, a lot of people in the thread also suggested setting up a trust. Specifically, they were talking about a revocable living trust. Have you seen this advice come up a lot?
Oh, absolutely. Trusts are a really powerful tool for asset protection, and, they can be particularly useful for someone like the OP who has, experienced this significant financial windfall. Essentially, what a revocable living trust allows you to do is manage your assets during your lifetime, but also dictate how those assets will be distributed after your death. And this can help to avoid probate and potentially reduce estate taxes, which can be a big consideration for someone with a high net worth.
And it sounds like the OP is actually already on top of this. He mentioned in the thread that his lawyer advised him to set up a trust, and he's in the process of doing that.
That's a really smart move. It shows that he is taking those proactive steps to safeguard his financial future.
Absolutely. It's like he's building a fortress around his wealth, brick by legal brick. But, it's not just about legal documents, right?
Right.
It's also about being smart
Mm.
and how you handle your finances in a relationship.
Absolutely. And financial transparency can be tricky. The thread had some really interesting perspectives on how much to reveal and when to reveal it.
I was really surprised by how many people recommended being cautious about disclosing your wealth early on in a relationship. Some even went as far as to suggest dating within your financial bracket or seeking out partners with successful careers to minimize like the financial disparities. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's where things get really interesting, right? Because on one hand, I can understand that desire to protect yourself from someone who might be more interested in your money than in you. But on the other hand, I think it's important to consider the potential drawbacks of that
What
approach.
kind of drawback?
Well, for instance, if you're deliberately hiding your financial status, you might attract people who are drawn to your perceived, averageness. And that might not be the most authentic foundation for a relationship, right? It could also create a sense of imbalance in the relationship if one partner is constantly worried about revealing too much or feeling like they need to downplay their success.
That's a really good point. It's almost like you're creating this sort of barrier to a genuine connection by not being upfront about who you are financially speaking.
Exactly. I think the key takeaway here is that there's really no one size fits all answer. Transparency and openness are obviously crucial in any relationship, but it's also essential to be mindful of your own boundaries and comfort levels.
So it's all about finding that balance between protecting yourself and, being open and honest with your partner.
Absolutely. It's about navigating those conversations with sensitivity and honesty, which admittedly can be challenging.
Oh, for sure. Speaking of challenges,
Mm.
one recurring theme that really stood out to me was the importance of saying no. A lot of the commenters really stressed the need to learn how to refuse requests, especially when it comes to money.
Yeah, setting boundaries is absolutely crucial. Whether it's a small loan or a significant investment opportunity, you really need to be comfortable saying no if something doesn't feel right to you. It's about protecting your financial well-being, but also maintaining that sense of autonomy in the relationship.
And it's not always easy, right? Especially if you're a generous person or you care deeply about your partner's well-being.
It's true, but I think it's important to remember that healthy relationships are built on mutual respect and understanding, and not on financial dependence or manipulation.
There was this one anecdote in the thread that really stuck with me, and it was a commenter who shared his experience of being scammed out of his insulin and his diabetic medication. It wasn't even a huge amount of money, but the betrayal and vulnerability that he felt were just so palpable.
That's heartbreaking, and it highlights the fact that financial exploitation can happen on different scales, right? It's not always about these large sums of money. It can be about taking advantage of someone's kindness or their desperation.
It's a stark reminder that you need to be discerning about who you trust and how much you're willing to share, both financially and emotionally.
Right. And that brings us to another important point that was brought up a lot, which is recognizing red flags.
Yeah.
There was a really insightful comment about being wary of certain patterns of behavior, things like inconsistent employment history,
Huh.
excessive credit card debt, living beyond one's means, constantly asking probing financial
It's
questions.
almost like a checklist for potential trouble, right? If you're seeing those red flags popping up, it might be time to step back and reevaluate the situation.
Those are definitely points to consider. Of course, it's not about judging someone solely on their financial history, but it's about being observant and paying attention to those patterns.
It's like being a financial detective looking for clues and trying to piece together the story.
Exactly. It's about using your critical thinking skills and trusting your instincts.
Yeah, it's almost like you need to run a financial background check on someone before you even start getting involved.
Well, I wouldn't go that far,
Yeah.
but I do think it's important to just be aware, right? It's not about being paranoid or distrustful of everyone, but it's just about being informed and making wise choices.
Okay, so we've talked about legal strategies, we've talked about recognizing red flags. What about just the lifestyle choices that we make? Can that actually play a role in maybe attracting or even repelling potential exploiters?
Oh, absolutely. The thread touched on this quite a bit as well. There was this recurring theme of, even if you have the means to indulge in a more extravagant lifestyle,
Yeah.
living modestly.
I noticed that too. A lot of the commenters talked about not flaunting your wealth, driving a modest car, maybe choosing more casual date locations. It's almost like they're trying to fly under the radar.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating approach, isn't it? It's like they're trying to filter out those people who might be attracted to the wrong things.
It's like saying, hey, I want to be loved for who I am, not for what's in my bank account.
Exactly. It's about prioritizing shared values and interests over material possessions. One commenter mentioned, he really focuses on finding partners who are passionate about similar things, who are driven and ambitious in their own right. It's about seeking that genuine connection that goes beyond the superficial.
I love that. It's almost like shifting the focus from protecting your assets to actually building a relationship that's founded on something much deeper.
Right. It's about creating a dynamic where both partners feel valued and respected for who they are as individuals and not for what they can contribute financially.
That makes a lot of sense. It's not just about avoiding the wrong people, it's about attracting the right ones.
And creating an environment where genuine connection can actually flourish.
Okay, so we've covered prenuptial agreements, we've talked about trusts, being cautious about financial transparency, setting those boundaries, recognizing those red flags, living modestly. I mean, that's a lot to digest. Was there anything else from the thread that really stood out to you?
Well, we can't leave out the more unconventional, shall we say, humorous responses.
Oh, you mean the gems like being broke, marrying a woman who makes more money than you, and my personal favorite, abstinence?
Precisely. I mean, those definitely generated a lot of laughs in the thread.
While they might not be the most practical solutions, they do highlight a certain level of anxiety, I think,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe even a sense of humor about this whole situation.
Absolutely. Humor can be a really powerful coping mechanism, a way to deal with those uncomfortable or sensitive topics.
It's like they're saying this is a serious issue, but let's not take ourselves too seriously either.
Exactly. It's a way to acknowledge the absurdity of some of the advice while still, recognizing that there are some underlying concerns there.
And speaking of anxieties, did you notice the recurring suggestion of vasectomies?
I did. It's a rather extreme measure, wouldn't you say?
Oh, for sure. But it really does tie back into that fear of financial obligations,
Right.
especially when it comes to children, and child support payments. It's like they're trying to just eliminate that risk altogether.
It's an interesting perspective on family planning, though, perhaps not one that everyone would endorse.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
But it makes you think about the lengths to which some people are willing to go to protect themselves.
What I find so fascinating is how this entire thread, even the more outlandish suggestions, really reveals a deeper anxiety, I think, about vulnerability in relationships. It's not just about the money. It's about the power dynamics. It's about trust and that fear of being taken advantage of.
I think you're right. There's this underlying sense of wanting to safeguard not only their assets, but also their autonomy and their decision-making power.
Like they're searching for that balance between, being open and generous in a relationship, but also protecting themselves from potential harm.
It's a delicate dance, isn't it?
It really is. And there's no easy answer, but I think these conversations are such a great starting point. It's about raising awareness, encouraging that open communication, and, exploring different strategies for navigating the complexities of relationships and finances.
And it's important to remember this isn't just a man's issue, as the thread title might suggest. Women face financial exploitation too.
Of course, vulnerability can affect anyone, regardless of gender. These strategies and insights that we've been discussing can apply to absolutely anyone who is seeking to protect their financial well-being and build those healthy, balanced relationships.
Absolutely. It's a universal concern and something I think that we should all be talking about more openly and honestly. This whole deep dive has really gotten me thinking about the interplay between love and money. It's such a fascinating and often taboo subject.
It is, and it deserves a lot more attention because finances play such a significant role in our lives and in our relationships. And ignoring these dynamics can lead to so many problems down the road.
So where do we go from here? What can our listeners take away from this conversation?
I think the key takeaway is the importance of awareness, communication, and proactive planning. Whether it's about seeking legal counsel, setting those boundaries, or just being more mindful of your own financial choices, taking those steps to protect yourself can make a world of difference.
I completely agree. It's about empowering yourself with that knowledge and making informed decisions. And I think it's about having those open and honest conversations with your partner about money, about your expectations, and about your boundaries. I think those conversations can be uncomfortable at times, but they are so essential for building a strong and healthy foundation.
It's about shifting the paradigm from fear and secrecy to transparency and collaboration.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And, it makes me think about the bigger picture. This isn't just about protecting yourself from financial exploitation. It's about fostering a sense of trust and respect and that mutual understanding in all of your relationships.
Absolutely. It's about creating a world where we can all feel safe and secure and empowered to pursue our dreams without that fear of being taken advantage of.
This has been a really thought-provoking conversation. I hope our listeners are walking away with some valuable insights.
Yeah, me too. This
Yeah.
topic is so relevant, and I think often people don't realize just how much their financial well-being and their relationships are actually intertwined.
Absolutely. And it's something that can really affect anyone at any stage of life.
Exactly. Whether you're a seasoned investor or just starting out, whether you're single or in a committed relationship, these are conversations that are worth having.
So true. And, while we've been focusing on the potential risks and ways to protect yourself, I think it's also important to remember that, relationships are ultimately about connection and trust and those shared values.
I couldn't agree more. We don't want people to walk away from this feeling like they need to be suspicious of absolutely everyone they meet.
Right. It's not about living in a state of fear or constantly guarding yourself against potential exploiters. It's about being informed, setting healthy boundaries, and choosing partners who align with your values.
Exactly. It's about creating those relationships where both partners feel safe and respected and empowered.
Beautifully said. So as we wrap up this deep dive, is there anything else you want to leave our listeners with? Any final words of wisdom?
I think the most important thing is to remember that you're not alone. If you're struggling with these issues, if you're feeling vulnerable or uncertain, reach out for support. Talk to a therapist, a financial advisor, or even just a trusted friend or family member.
That's such great advice. Sometimes just talking about these things can make a world of difference.
It really can. And remember, knowledge is power. The more you understand about yourself and your values and the potential risks out there, the better equipped you'll be to navigate the complexities of relationships and finances.
This has been such an insightful conversation. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
It's been my pleasure. Always happy to explore these important topics.
And to all our listeners out there, thanks for tuning in. We hope you found this episode helpful. And hey, if you're looking for more deep dives into the human experience, be sure to subscribe to Voices of the Soul on your favorite podcast platform.
And don't forget to check out Shauna Pelage's insightful videos on YouTube. You'll find a wealth of information on relationships, personal growth, and so much more.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those conversations going.